Hello, everybody. My name is Michael Kelly. I reckon a fair number of you may know me already, but just in case, I want to let you know a little bit about me. I'm a professor at Loyola, Chicago School of Social Work. I direct a program that we'll be talking about a bit today, the School Mental Health Advanced Practice Program. And it's a 15-credit, 2-year, 99% online a postmaster's certificate for any and every school-based clinician who's interested in expanding and deepening their practice. We're going to talk about that a bit, and I'm going to also bring you into some really exciting stuff I've been doing lately that relates to this whole very serious time we're all in around school reopening. So I'm going to be sharing some of that with you. I am going to be a solo act today, so I'm going to be pulling up right now the Facebook Live because I'm currently in Zoom as we're talking. But I do want to make sure that we have a chance. So I'm going to be pulling up right now the Facebook Live because I'm currently in Zoom. So there we are. I see a few people that are on. I see Penny Williams-Wolford, who's a student of ours in the SMHAPP program. Very cool. If other people are on and want to say hello, that'll help me kind of organize kind of what I speak to and how I speak today. So if anyone wants to put that in. I'm going to turn off the fan a little bit because it's pretty loud, and I don't know if it's loud for all of you, so hold on. Okay. So a lot is going on in our world right now. A lot of very, I think, important and vital things that directly impact what school social workers do and what school mental health professionals do. A lot of it is also directly related, obviously, to the larger mission of schools and K-12 schools. And many of us are sorting out what that means for us in terms of our own school districts and our own maybe communities if we don't live in the same district we work in, what that means for us, for our children. These are all things that we're going to get into a bit today as I present some initial work that we've been doing recently related to school reopening and thinking about it. And we will definitely talk about that more in the coming weeks here on Wednesday's Facebook Live at schoolsocialwork.net. Additionally, just to let people know in case you're new to what we do, this is a real labor of love for me because I myself was a school social worker for 14 years in the Chicago area. I was fortunate enough to figure out at some point in all of that I wanted to pursue a doctorate and to pursue the chance to maybe learn more about what the research world thinks about all these things so that I could hopefully be helpful to a larger group of practitioners. I'd always liked speaking publicly. I had always enjoyed writing. And I was fortunate that I found a good fit with my doctoral program at Jane Addams at UIC. So I was able to do that, and then have been at Loyola now since that time, basically since 2006. So I've been in some good spots in my own work where I've been able to, I think, try to do what I'm going to introduce to you a bit today, which is to, wherever possible, try to do research that really is drawing on what the practice world is concerned about, what the practice world is doing. And then if I can put together teams that do that well enough, we can then have a conversation with those practitioners about the research that we've done and find out more about what they think they're going to do with the research that we've been able to perform. So I do a lot of work on survey research. I do a lot of work with qualitative research, focus groups, interviews. I also am very interested, and this will come up when we talk a bit more in a minute about the SMHAPP program. I'm very interested in this idea of evidence-based practice. And one of the best ways to get at that is to be looking at a body of research on a topic, something called a systematic review, where we take a bunch of research, not necessarily research that I did personally with a team, but that others have done, and we put together an analysis of what that means and what we think that data from those studies say. And that also takes the form of something called a meta-analysis. So some of these may be terms that take you back to your research class in your grad school program. And I hope as you're listening today that if you're interested in these things, if you want to return and go back to learning more about your field and get better at understanding data get better at appraising and finding evidence that you'll consider applying to our program. We are all about helping you be more evidence-informed and data-driven. So I'm going to say more about that. I'm also going to brag on and talk about some of the fabulous people that joined me last week for the 15th annual Family School Partnership Program, School Mental Health Advanced Practice Program Summer Institute. We had over 70 of us, I think from 10 different states when all was said and done. Most of us school social workers, though there were certainly other special educators, school psychs, school counselors also there. The goal of the 2 days was to look critically at what we know right now about this whole business of reopening and how to do it in a trauma-informed, social-emotional learning and anti-racist framework. I'm going to do a share screen in a minute and show you a bit of that, the agenda that we created, that we worked from. And it was a fantastic 3 days. The first day was all the SMHAPP certificate students from the 4th cohort came together. We learned a bunch of things about data. We talked about kind of the overall goals of the 2-day event. And then Thursday and Friday, we had the CEU event where people came, again, from these 10 states, and we had some really great reflections based on a variety of things that people were doing. So I'm just going to pull up the agenda to show you a little bit about what we were doing. We, again, focused on this business of school reopening because, as we all know, this is a very urgent topic on all of our minds. Many districts, I think, are making decisions right now or have just recently. So we wanted to take on this idea of what would it mean for us to try to do a case study simulation where over 2 days, small groups of our attendees would meet and play characters, and they would play characters based on what they thought people in different parts of the school world. So principal was one of the leaders of the groups, and those were led by our SMHAPP students. We had people play the school social worker, school psych, obviously. We had people play a teacher union rep. We had people play special educators, paraprofessionals, parents. Lots of different disciplines showed up. Before we did all that, we got 2 wonderful keynotes from 2 of my favorite people in this world, a school nurse expert called Robin Kogan. Robin has gotten a lot of attention in the last couple of weeks, deservedly so, for making a comment in the New York Times that this whole business of reopening without the necessary protections, without stopping community spread, is akin to playing Russian roulette with kids and teachers. And then she's been on a lot of national news shows and talking about that. So she spoke about her experience as a school nurse. She works in Camden, New Jersey, and what she's learned about this whole business about reopening. Then we had Jonathan Singer, who's a prof here at Loyola, a good friend of mine. He created the Social Work Podcast. He's also the president of the American Association of Suicidology. He came and talked a bit about this business of how we're really in a disaster. I know it feels like kind of an ongoing crisis, which it is, but disaster framework is a more, I think, effective way to view all this, because we're in this space where things are happening that haven't happened to most of us. They're happening on the scale that everybody's in some way involved. As Robin said in her talk, we're all in the water, in the churning water. We're in different boats. So some of us are in boats that are more protected, or in places where we feel more able to weather the storm in the water, and others are not. Others are really suffering. But all of us are in that. All of us are in that storm, in that water right now. So he talked about that. We then, as I said, got everybody into their small groups, and then they had to craft a scenario proposal where they said, this is how we're going to reopen. We're going to either go fully virtual, we're going to go fully brick and mortar 5 days, we're going to do a hybrid. And 9 groups formed, and over that afternoon, they came up with a way to do that, mapping what they did on the tiers. So we had tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 interventions that related to racial equity work, SEL work, and trauma-informed work. They then turned in those proposals, and they went home and relaxed. And then Jonathan and Robin and I looked at them all, and then we came up with stuff the next day where we told them, okay, now that that's happened and you've done that, now you're in October, or now you're about to start the school year, and this is what's happening now. And we challenged them to figure out a response. And so that's part of what I'm still looking through, reading and kind of formulating some different responses to, is the stuff that people came up with in the day 2 is fascinating, because they had to respond to everything from a beloved teacher dying over the summer from COVID, to an outbreak on a school bus that shut things down, to a group of kids that had not been in contact with anybody since the mid-March shutdown, and trying to find them and stay in touch with them. All these different things that could have happened. And by the way, some of the people on today were part of this, so I'm telling you things you already know, but the people that are new to us today, all the groups had their own freedom to pick how they wanted to open. We used 3 examples of schools at a pre-K elementary, middle school, high school level, drawing on Illinois report card data. So they were real schools. We let them name their school and add other details as needed. But they were able to decide their own version of what reopening meant. And their version of reopening was very, very diverse and different. And again, I'll have more to say about that when I have a chance to write it up. I also was very concerned, given what we've seen with the murders of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and the brutalization that's continuing and accelerating in some ways with this federal police and military presence being visited to my city, as well as in Portland and other places. This idea of looking at what being an anti-racist school mental health professional looks like in these times, where we're talking about Black Lives Mattering and trying to really look at this issue of police brutality. And so I did a lecture on that. That's actually available right now on our YouTube channel, and go look at it and hear it for yourself. And then at the end of all that, we gathered people and had a graduation ceremony for this certificate that I'm going to tell you about now. I'm just kind of curious. I'm going to go out of that screen share for a minute and bounce back to the actual Facebook Live. Anybody that has questions or thoughts that they want to put in, got Susan and Penny, who are both part of the festivities last week, saying good, nice things. Thank you. Good to see you, Susan, as well. But people who are new to all this, just heard all this for the first time, any questions you all have, certainly Penny and Susan can answer things because they were there, and Penny was one of the principals of one of the schools. Her school, I believe, was named Justice Elementary. And Penny actually gave a very emphatic and clear statement of something that I think I want to, write about myself and think about further. This idea of acceptable death, that essentially part of what initially happened with Betsy DeVos and Trump and these other people that are wanting to just reopen schools, largely I think because they just wanted to be underway as the election season starts and they can say they reopen schools. They're not really seeming to consult science, and even some of the things they're using to justify it, the kids are falling behind and kids are needy. They haven't really done the things to fund those kids in the first place. So it's a very interesting kind of shell game that I've been watching over the last 3 weeks, where people have started with this idea that we all need to be back in schools because kids need to be. There was this American Academy of Pediatrics report that was roundly criticized by myself and many other people. They eventually tried to do a makeup report where they did a statement with the Maine Teachers Union and Superintendents Association, where they said that the health and safety of teachers matter. So that was the initial kind of concern that a lot of us had, that we were having pediatricians, or at least their association, kind of weaponized to claim that we needed to reopen no matter what. Then we had what Trump and DeVos said, and again, this very kind of science-free and evidence-free, really, commentary from both of them about what this means and why they think it needs to happen. And then in the midst of all that, we had the governor of Florida, who is in a lot of ways, I think, really lockstep with Trump in terms of his politics, in terms of his persona, was one of the first out of the gate to basically say, we're going to essentially mandate that schools in Florida reopen, that you have to be 5 days in person. And predictably, that hasn't gone well. One, because the schools in Florida themselves are in desperate circumstances, because the community is in desperate circumstances. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you a Twitter thread that I just put together today. So those of you who are not on Twitter and want to go there, you can follow me or follow our site, schoolsocialwork.net, on Twitter. And you can see this thread. This thread has already gotten a lot of traction. People are retweeting it and sharing it widely. And it really summarizes some really cool work that relates to the reopening, relates to COVID, relates to Florida. So I'm going to pull that up now. And again, keep any questions and comments coming. I will circle back to looking at them at some point as I go here. So a major feature of thinking about school reopening in a summer like this is realizing that for a lot of reasons, we have not done a good job of collecting data at the federal and in some cases state levels that really allow us to even know, like, what is the context for when we decide to reopen? Like, what would that even look like? Why would we do it? How would it be clear for us to say this is okay? What risks are we putting into place? So this is a thread based on a brand new tool that is live on schoolsocialwork.net right now. You can go look at it. You can go play with it. Certainly critique it. Send questions to us about it. This is a first try. We're very excited about it, but it's very much a work in progress, and we're going to continue to update it. So this is a screenshot of the site itself. I'm not going to go through every little bit of the site for you today, but I just want to describe it a little bit. Florida has some of the highest case counts in the world right now. In the midst of that, this Governor DeSantis, declares we're just going to reopen no matter what, though he is backing off that a bit because some of the main teachers unions and other parent organizations have joined a lawsuit essentially demanding that he allow local control, that he allow local districts and local counties to decide this very important issue about reopening and safety. I was very fortunate, a colleague of mine in Florida, Rob Lucio, is a professor at St. Leo University, connected me with this fella, Derek Noce, I believe, or Noce, I don't know, I've never pronounced his last name to him. So Derek, N-O-C-E, wonderful person to work with. He's a data analytics expert. And he and I and Rob teamed up to create this dashboard that you see here, where based on work he does a lot, he does work a lot for corporate clients and for Wall Street and things like that, looking at data and how to organize it visually and how to tell a story with it. So what Derek did was he put in a bunch of publicly available data sets into this mix of this data table and took us through kind of what we can say right now as of, in his case, July 19th, about reopening schools in Florida. So we use specific categories. Here's a few examples of them. We use the average daily enrollment. We had used the cases ages 5 to 14 that have COVID as percentage of total enrollment. Cases in the county as percentages of school enrollment, so showing more how broadly it is in their county. Again, active COVID hospitalizations for adults and deaths. So again, we focused on kids, but we also focused on the larger community, because one of the other issues that we're still very much hearing from the science is that even if kids are not going to get very sick from this, though some definitely are, they could very well pass it, particularly older kids. There's a big study out of Korea very recently that shows that 10 to 18s are passing it very much like the young adults that are going to bars and hanging out. So these issues of how it would impact the adults is also really central, both the teachers in the schools and then their parents and grandparents when they come home. Another set of data that was publicly available that Derek helped us find and that I thought was really central was this business about instructional space per student. Both of the community school districts in my town in Oak Park, Illinois, their decisions were divergent. The high school decided to go fully online with an option for on Wednesdays to have kids with special needs or academic needs or otherwise to be on site at school getting additional tutoring and support. The elementary district, K-8 district, decided something different. They decided essentially an A-B schedule that some of you may be seeing where you are, where their kids would be at school 2 days a week and then home and vary that. But both of the district's decisions in my very own town, and these are actually schools that I went to myself when I was a young person, was based around instructional space as much as anything else. That the high school was an old building that is very vertical. It didn't have a lot of random or malleable space. So they had to say, if we have 3,400 kids in a building this big that is basically landlocked, we don't have very much space to go outside and do much. We don't have the room to create these smaller socially distant classrooms like other countries have been able to do. So that was a key factor in deciding what they were going to do here, even though in Illinois, relatively speaking, we have not had a second wave flare-up outbreak like certainly these other states are showing that we're talking about, like Florida. So that was a huge area that we looked at. Another area we looked at that will be very understandable to the people listening today is students per school nurse and students per mental health professional. And we included school social work, school psych, and all of that in there. Again, questions you have and things, put them in the chat and I'll try to answer them when I come back into it. This is Miami-Dade County, just to give you an example, the biggest county in Florida, and their metrics. The colors basically are indicating a higher risk score. We can't say more about it than that at this point because we're not validating this as an empirical measure. We haven't predicted anything with any accuracy based on any prior pandemics because we weren't alive the last time. So we're trying to say essentially we think these things are really important. We know that these things are not necessarily very available. So interestingly, the one thing Miami-Dade has going for it relative to some of the other things was they had instructional space that at least allowed for some social distancing. But once you get in some of the other categories, their ratios of school nurse to students and school social work to students are too high. They definitely have a very high community spread. So what does this all mean? I mean, again, you can go get this link yourself. It's in the article. I'll put it in the chat while we're talking in a little bit. But what we did want to do is we didn't want to make any kind of definitive cutoff scores. So the school risk scores go from 0.42 up to like 14 something. Actually not Miami-Dade, another county is higher than Miami-Dade. But that number itself doesn't mean very much because we can't say that an 8 score, it means this versus a 10 score. It just means that these scores are going higher based on a formula we came up with. I do think though, for a lay audience and for those of us trying to make decisions and advocate to our schools, the idea that no school county or no county in Florida, despite all the pushback, all the no masks, this is a hoax, this is blah, 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 no school counties had a risk score of 0. And many had a risk score of 5 or above, meaning they had some issues in all those measures that I just mentioned. So we're going to keep at this. It also dovetails with some things I'll talk about another time, which is our national survey data and what that tells us. And what we know is that we believe that we need to have enough space. We need to have enough people like us, school social workers. We need to have enough school nurses. And we need to have the overall community spread be low enough that it's safe enough for the schools to open. So that's kind of what that gets at and some of that material. And that's brand new. That just went live yesterday. So I will see if people have comments or questions on that. And if you do, please let me know. People are chiming in. Oh, Dana's here. Awesome. Great. Dana Harmon is a new colleague, a professor at Loyola. Great to see you, Dana. Glad to have you with us. We are going to shift gears in a minute and talk more about kind of some of the other ways that we work on these issues at Loyola and some things I want to invite you into and to hear more about our SMHAPP certificate. But any other questions people have about this data and this project I just spoke about? Yeah, and there's reference to that amazing comment of the governor in Missouri that kids will just get over it. Yeah, I think we're and again, I think all education and all social work has a political dimension to it. It doesn't have to be in terms of who you vote for and telling people who to vote for, but it is very hard to look at what's happening right now around this crisis, around this disaster response or lack of response from a lot of elected officials, and to see some real themes. And it's not a complete red-blue Republican Democrat. There definitely been some Democrats too that wanted to kind of skate through this or kind of minimize what COVID was about. But clearly we're seeing from a number of governors in red states and a number of national politicians a real antagonism towards science, towards evidence, towards a way of critically looking at data like I just showed you, which is not perfect. This is data we put together. It's publicly available. So that's partly a limitation when and if we write this up for a future research paper. But these are attempts that we're trying to make to, in a dispassionate way, look at what do we know about the needs that schools and communities and counties might have, at the same time that their very governor has at least started from a position that's very hard line saying we're just going to reopen and you have to deal with it. And the fact that he's begun to step back from that, even if he's just doing that in a more PR way, I think is indicative of people both, the continuing ongoing disaster of our response as a nation, but also I think the way that people are using data to push back. They're saying, if we are a state that has more cases than lots of other nations, and we're one state out of 50, maybe we need to do something different. So again, as Penny says here, it's a great segue. As always, Penny is always bringing good stuff. Data should always drive our decisions recommendations. So let's talk about that for a minute. I'm gonna now show you some things about our certificate program. We are going to spend some time just getting into kind of the rationale about why we're doing this, what this has been about, and if people are interested in pursuing it or learning more about it, I'll talk about that as well. Okay, here we go. And all this is being recorded, so we will have the ability for you all to go find this and listen to it on our page and other things. It is really important as we embark on whatever this school year reveals or what emerges, that we put self-care prominently in the work we do. All of you that made time to be here today have some way you're acting as a professional helper, I'm sure. You're an educator, you work directly as a clinician, you are a concerned citizen who's interested in knowing more about these things. We are in some ways, I think, the most likely population to not always put self-care front and center. The survey data that I'll speak about at another time in another Facebook Live, we found lots of our national sample of school social workers, just to tell you this one bit, saying they had lots of worries about family members related to COVID, about their kids that they worked with at their schools, and lowest on their list of worries was their own health and their own kind of well-being. And I think that's part of what we do for better or for worse, and I would argue mostly worse. I mean, it's good that we're selfless to help others, but we can only help people to the extent we help ourselves. So I always like to start this when I talk about this program, because even though it's a ambitious and demanding program in a lot of ways, it is meant to be a place for you to come and find support and to learn from others about how they are, navigating, not just a pandemic, but also just doing good school mental health work and taking care of themselves so they can take care of everybody else. So again, I'm the director of this program. I created it with the help of a lot of people at Loyola, just to name a few of them. Stephanie Chapman, who's been a longtime assistant dean at our school, several deans prior to our current dean, Gautam Menon, our associate dean, Jim Marley, just a few of the key people that have been instrumental in making sure this program takes off. We've had 4 cohorts now. We're looking for our 5th cohort to start this fall. That could be you. Applications are due August 1st. So what is this program, this SMHAPP program? We're going to talk about a bit about the problem that it seeks to solve or address. It's a multi-faceted problem, but it's a problem nonetheless. What tech we use to try to address it. A model that we've started to develop that I think is getting traction, that people that maybe are on today that are part of it can speak to. I will brag on some of the people doing great work. There's many people I could brag on. We have over 30 people that have been in it or are graduated. So there's lots of people I can talk about, but I'm going to show you a few of them. And then if there's questions you have, I will have a few questions for you as well. So this is the problem. The problem is any of us that are on today that do school mental health work, and this data is stuff we've collected that's school social work specific, but all of you know this in different places that you sit. We know that a lot of us are even before a pandemic, even before the Black Lives Matter uprising, we're very concerned about macro issues in our schools. The ways schools did or didn't handle the school to prison pipeline, the ways that schools had disproportionate numbers of Black and brown kids in special education, the issue of school violence. I mean, I could go on. There's lots of things that are at a school level that aren't just the individual kid level. And we know that there's a lot of things that school mental health people can do with other interested people in their schools if they tackle it at a tier 1, we often call it. The problem is we also say we don't have the time. We sometimes don't know how, but mostly we don't have the time. We don't have the time because we're putting out fires and we're responding to maybe arguably some crises caused by the lack of things at tier 1. The other really crucial issue, which is a little uncomfortable to talk about initially, but it's important to put on the table, is that most of us, when we get out of grad school, never have a direct supervisor that is a school psych, school social worker, school counselor, school nurse. We're essentially in a district where our director of special ed might be our supervisor, our principal. And that's a really serious issue when we think about how do we get better at our practice, how do we make mistakes and still learn from them, how do we deal with crises in our own life. These are all things that other disciplines that do social work can look at and say, yeah, of course I have a clinical director, of course I have group supervision. Well, that's not true of us, and so we need to have a way to respond and deal with that. The other issue that I think is really crucial we get at with this program is this business about data. That a lot of how we make change, whether it's a big data set like I just showed you, or whether it's something more direct to your goals for a specific student, is learning how to collect and use and explain data effectively. And a lot of people, again, say that they don't feel like they've gotten sufficient training in that, or that what they know how to do, they don't feel like that's enough. They want to go deeper. So our program is designed to address all these things. And I think we do a fairly good job of it based on what we've been told by our students and certainly what we try to do as teachers. And we base it on not, again, just kind of my own personal experience, though I would have benefited from all these things when I was out there for 14 years, but really research that we've done and others have done, which is this idea that there's a lot of people that are in this kind of middle group, 67% of us that do some of this work at a tier 1 prevention level, some of this data-driven work, evidence-informed work, some of the time. And we want to do it more, but we don't have the time, don't have the resources, we don't have the support. And so we know that those people are there to be reached. And I would have been one of them if I had been asked these questions when I was in the field. So what do we do about that? We need to put some things together to make sure people can actually learn and implement these cool cutting edge ideas. And the way we do that is to put together a professional learning community. That it's one thing for a professor to talk about it, it's another thing for it to be in a book, but it really needs to come to life in a group of people who continue to get to know each other, celebrate each other, support each other, sometimes even cry with each other, because that's how people really learn in other parts of their lives, and that's how they're going to learn in this. And we have some initial research on 3 projects I did here in Chicago, in Ontario, Canada, and Michigan that showed that. It's really important to be evidence informed, even in a crisis disaster time like this. This is a systematic review we did around trauma-informed practice that found that as of 2 years ago, we had no sophisticated, rigorous evidence for the effectiveness of a trauma-informed approach at a school level. So it's not just that the practitioners need more skills and more time, it's that we actually need to know more about what works. Now that doesn't mean that trauma isn't real, it doesn't mean that kids in schools aren't being traumatized. Often they're being traumatized by things in the school, not just things they bring from home or their community. But it also means we need to slow down, like this visual says, this article we wrote about it, and really ask ourselves, what do we actually know when we say we're a trauma-informed school? For instance, can you say you're a trauma-informed school if you have very realistic active shooter drills, if you have armed police walking through your halls, if you have a dress code that disproportionately penalizes girls, particularly Black and brown girls possibly? Those things don't necessarily sit well with a trauma-informed approach. And we learn all that in the SMHAPP program. We ask you to take a class where you get to know evidence-based practice and all its various facets. You look at topics you really care about, and you look closely at what the evidence is for and against them, and you generate ideas from that for a project, which will be the model I'll show you in a minute. So all of this is kind of adding up to a larger project, and some of you that have joined us today, I'm sure will know some of these things, so I don't want to belabor them too much. We have a site, schoolsocialwork.net, where we are trying to put up any and everything we can that is evidence-informed, free, and easy to use. It has to be all 3 of those things. So we're hoping that this new tool I just showed you, the Florida stuff, fits that. We are, over time, hoping to generate from our SMHAPP certificate and our network a group of people who agree to be master mentors, people who are willing to really provide that kind of informal support on an ongoing basis around different topics for people. And we want to have as many different PLCs as we can form as possible. We have obviously this certificate program, which is one way to do it, to get graduate credit to do it. But there are other ways that we also want to facilitate through our network site. And we have over, as of now, it's 4,650 people are there. So this is the network. A lot of you have been there. This is one of our students that graduated, Brianna Stiegel, and her work was focused on a specialized school that worked with kids with profound disabilities, communication disabilities, physical disabilities in Central Illinois. And she, based on behaviors that she was seeing, based on frustrations she saw in the staff, reactions to kids, she wanted to see if she could get a whole school to adopt a calm classroom mindfulness-based intervention. And so that was her project, and that's what she worked on. And this is her writing about that on our network. You can look her up on our .NET site as well. Amazing work that she did. One of the profound stories that she told that I always love to think about is after she had gotten the calm classroom lessons and other things delivered via announcements on the intercom and within classrooms, and she started to get teacher buy-in, There was a teacher just having something happen to her. She was upset. She was, crying in the hallway a little bit. And a kid who was, fairly nonverbal a lot of the time. Like he didn't often use his words very much. And, honestly, she wasn't so sure when she was doing the lessons with his teacher in her classroom, if he was even picking up on the mindfulness stuff. He walked over to this teacher who he didn't know, who wasn't his teacher, and in the midst of the hallway taught her some of the calm classroom stuff to help her calm down. And again, this is the kind of celebration and excitement that we like to hear about on a twice a month basis when we come together in person on camera to talk about what we're doing with our projects. Obviously, Brianna also, if you read her article she did for the .NET site, she had some behavioral data and big kind of school level data that showed that this little guy that she told the story about and many others were learning things that were actually affecting the behavioral data in her school. She was seeing discipline referrals go down. She was seeing teacher satisfaction increase. These are the kinds of things you could decide you want to pursue at our SMHAPP program. Again, self-care will always be a key theme. This is an article by one of our grads, Megan Tracy, where she wrote about learning yoga as a way to kind of get to her own kind of self-care regimen so she could do her job better and just have a better quality of life. We've been at it through the .NET and the network site, and we continue to do that. We actually just hit 2,000 Twitter followers yesterday, so I got to update that slide. We are very interested in students showing their work. This is Tanya Hernandez, who was part of our 2-day event, just graduated our program. This is one of her kids and her doggie. And this is the project that she did. She was working on a model for the 5th largest school district in the country, Clark County, Nevada, is where she works as a school social work liaison. And then COVID happens and she's told, okay, so we have a model already, but we need a new version of it because you're gonna go and have to explain it to everybody in this big district that we're going online for the rest of the semester. And she had 3 days to do it. And she went and used the stuff from our classes and she talked to her colleagues and she put this together. And this is me with Tanya doing a webinar in late March about what she came up with. It was so successful that her boss not only said great job to her and implemented it, but actually shared it with the State Board of Education in Nevada, and it was then disseminated and shared as a model to the entire state. And again, Tanya, if she was here today, and maybe she is, would be able to say that she learned a lot about how to do this from our program. And she's just a fantastic person. We also did a lot of webinars during this crisis itself. And these are all people who are current and graduated school SMHAPP students. And they talked about how to do high school social work in the midst of this pandemic. This webinar and the other 4 we did for the different grade levels have been seen close to 10,000 people now on our YouTube channel. Here's a current SMHAPP student, Lisa Baker, who is doing awesome work in an alternative school. She did the alternative school webinar, and she's also then led a PLC after that, where she gathers alternative ed school social workers together, and they talk about what's going on and how to get ready for fall. This is the cohort. It's one of my favorite photos ever. I compare it to just this kind of iconic photo of the whole band being together. This is the 3rd cohort. I look forward to having a 4th cohort photo like this. These are all people from many different states. We have Nebraska, Washington State, Ohio, Nevada, Wisconsin, and Missouri all here. And then the rest are in Illinois. And this is a feature of the program as well. You come together in the summer, provided we're able to do that safely. This year we did it virtually, but last year they came together with me in Chicago, and then they did a 2-day event where they presented their work. All right, so what is this curriculum? What is this thing I'm talking about? I'll just say a little bit about it. I'll talk a little bit about the application process, and then if people have questions, we can do that before we go. It is meant to be very flexible and adaptable to what you're looking to do. It is graduate work, and that you will do things that graduate work expects of you, and that you'll write papers, not papers for the sake of them, papers that relate to the proposal of a school change project you want to do. You'll definitely do research, though it'll again be research that relates to your actual school practice. One of the people that's in this previous slide, Sean Delaney, there's Sean, who's one of our managing editors for our .NET site as well. She often talks about how she found the Tuesday night meetings twice a month in the integrative seminars to be a place where she learned things that she can go apply the next day. And again, that's a big feature of what we shoot for. So that integrative seminar is in a cohort. So you'll be with the same 10 to 15 people that you get to know. You'll be with them for the entire 2 years, twice a month, I should say. For some reason, most people have done it in our classes on Monday or Tuesday. That's not a requirement. It could be any day that works out for the group. It'll be taught by myself and some of my other school mental health faculty. You do that through an entire school year. So it's year 1, year 2, through the whole year. Year 1, you do a bunch of reading about the roles of school mental health professionals, the most up-to-date information about what works, what kind of things we need to know. Certainly there'll be a lot of things about this crisis we're in right now. And then you begin to develop a project, something you actually want to change about your school. Again, it could be a mindfulness intervention. It could be you want to tackle anti-racist equity work. It could be that you want to look at your LGBTQ population and how you can support them better. A lot of ways to kind of do those projects, and we empower you and support you in doing that. You do that at the same time you're doing what we call asynchronous classes, which is probably a word a lot of people didn't know before March when things shut down. That's the modular stuff. That's the stuff you can be doing over a semester at any time, middle of the night if you wake up, or you can bunch it up and do it all in like 3 weeks. This is stuff where we record lectures, we give you assignments, we send you to our library to do things. The first one is about evidence-based practice. That's where you really, again, drill down into topics you want to learn more about and get clear on the evidence and become proficient in that. The second one is a wonderful class about strength-based interventions that we learn about motivational interviewing, solution-focused brief therapy, mindfulness. And the last one, which is a beloved class taught by Professor Capio, is a class on data, where you really learn about collecting and using data at all levels of the triangle, and you get a lot of experience in kind of short assignments in applying it. This is all done over a 2-year process. Again, it's all done in sequence, and again, it's meant to be very relevant and applicable to you. So this project, this model I referred to, that's what this is. We ask you to come up with this project. We help you through year 1 of writing it up, doing the research on it. We have expert reviewers give you feedback, so we don't just throw you out there. Obviously, this is a good time to bring it to your larger leadership and say, hey, I'm doing this program. I want to do this change project. What do you think? How can you help me do it? That's what most of our people have done. This is some of the key components based on our model. You identify a problem, you look at data sources, which will help you also think about to do a needs assessment. You don't just go out there and say, I demand that this changes, or I'm gonna, click my heels and hope it changes. You have to build up key alliances. You have to make sure people in the school see the value and the urgency of what you want to do. And we help you with that. And then you put the intervention into place, maybe starting year 2. Most people have had to do it in year 2. They can't do it right away. And then you measure the outcomes of it. You have a plan to measure the outcomes, because to the extent that you can show a program works, that's going to mean a school keeps it going. And we teach you from the get-go that any real meaningful intervention in a school to change things is a 3 to 5 year proposition. So even though we're a 2-year deal, you're going to be doing this after you graduate from us, and we will hopefully, through all the things I've just showed you, stay in touch with you. All right, so a couple more things. Again, this is just more of us showing our work. That's Allie Hearn from Midwest PBIS and amazing school social worker in her own right. These are some of the projects and some of the examples of what people have done in previous years. The one on the left is Sean's work on an SEL advisory committee. The one in the middle is Dory's work in central Wisconsin, small town, on delivering zones of regulation to a elementary school. And then this is Tanya's work I mentioned before in Nevada. And here we are getting ready for last year's. Here's some more project work. This is a project that my colleague in Washington State did around Tier 2. The one in the middle, Carlos Evans did, related to a SEL social skills program that he was hoping to implement in his middle school. And the last one over here is Gabby's work and trying to do a special needs parent group for kids with special needs in both Spanish and in English, and do that effectively. Here's another one of our students talking about her work to try to do Tier 1 implementation, Laura Montiel. Lisa Johnson-Hare talking about restorative practices in her school, high school district in Missouri. And then, you know, maybe someday if this all interests you, you graduate, and you'll graduate and you will have 15 credits to move along a salary lane in your school. Many districts are giving, even in this tight time, at least some partial reimbursement. We do have financial aid as well, so you can get that. We do not yet have stipends or scholarship money. I'm hoping to keep trying to get some grants to do that. Again, we try to be at the front lines and talking about these issues. This was us last fall talking about restorative justice and the 1619 Project and anti-racist practice. And we will continue to do that. Obviously, it's on a lot of people's minds now, but it will not stop being on our minds. We'll talk about that a lot. Okay. So that's a lot of what our program's about. It's a really important space for us to kind of hear from you now. If you have any questions, if you don't, that's fine too. But basically, the application is free. You don't have to have much more than unofficial transcripts and a statement of purpose. And if you have recommendations, that's awesome. You don't have to have them officially right now, given the crunch of getting into schools and reaching people. But if you are interested in applying, I'm going to put my email in the Facebook Live right now. And you can reach out to me. They are due coming on August 1st, but if you get an application started by then, we can certainly give you some more time to get them done by then. I'm about halfway to where I want to be in terms of having a cohort. So we are really hoping that if people are interested in applying, that they do so right now. Any last questions? Anybody got anything they want to know more about? All right. Okay. So we are going to wind up in a minute. Just a couple notes. We will continue to have these Facebook Live meetings. This was me as a solo act today, but I'll definitely have guests in the coming weeks as well. If you are interested in being part of that, you have something you want to talk with me about, or you would like the larger schoolsocialwork.net world to know about, let me know. You can email me or follow me on Twitter and DM me. I'm also going to be, referring more to some of the COVID preparation work, the survey work we did, the Florida work we've got going. So you'll have a chance to learn more about that as well. Again, I really hope to see some of you maybe this fall as part of our SMHAPP program. Thank you very much. Thanks for coming, and have a good day.